Welcome to the Grit and Grace podcast, hosted by Tonya Bruton, a faith-filled journey where we celebrate the resilience of the human spirit intertwined with the grace of God. Here we delve into recovery stories, mental health, relationships, and deep dives into scripture, chapter by chapter and verse by verse. Our mission is clear: to encourage and inspire, equip the saints, and above all, glorify God through testimonies, Bible studies, interviews, and more. Broadcasting from the heart of Truth Seeker Texas Radio in Decatur, Texas. Catch new episodes every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, with daily replays at 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. Central Standard Time on www.truthseekertexasradio.com. YouTube and Spotify and other major platforms are uploaded on Thursdays. Get ready to be uplifted and empowered. And now, join us for today's episode of the Grit and Grace podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Grit and Grace podcast. I'm your host, Tonya Bruton, and I'm so glad that you're here listening or watching today. I hope this episode finds you well and blessed in the Lord. I'm so excited to bring a new guest to you today. Sometimes I'll do Bible studies by myself, and then sometimes I'll have guests on, and we talk about a lot of interesting things. But today, on Grit and Grace, we're going to have a conversation around the topic of caregiver fatigue, caregiver grief, and caregiver trauma, which is all an umbrella of the same thing. I just couldn't think of the one word, and maybe my guests will help me out with that. But these terms may sound foreign to some of you, but essentially caregiver grief is what I could take from it is something that occurs when a caregiver takes on the emotional stress and trauma of a person within their care. So today my guest is Melissa Miller. Melissa is a caregiver who is also chronically ill, a mom, and a business owner. She has learned the hard way that you can't care for others if you are running on empty tank spiritually, mentally, emotionally, or physically. Melissa has 15 years prior experience as a certified nursing assistant. That was actually my first job. When I started working as a CNA. But she has been working as a CNA for 15 years in long-term care facilities, and today is passionate about helping entrepreneurs who are caring for chronically ill loved ones. She became her husband's primary caregiver 4 years ago when he was diagnosed with epilepsy, and she lost her mother 3 years ago. So we're going to be talking about some heavy subjects, but I believe it's going to be a really healthy conversation, and it's going to be very enlightening. I'm looking forward to learning a lot from it. But to continue on, she cared for her father the last 2 years of his life, all while caring for her daughter and dealing with 2 chronic illnesses of her own. Can somebody say, geez, that's a lot? That's a lot of stuff, a lot of trial, and a lot of giving of oneself, I feel. But she says she knows she wouldn't have made it without her faith in the Lord. And so I'm so glad to have her on today. Melissa, welcome to Grit and Grace podcast.
Thank you for having me, Tonya. It's a treat to be here. And I definitely believe that whatever is said on this episode is going to definitely help someone else 100%. So thank you for inviting me.
So let's get into today's topic. And I'm going to be learning a lot from you today. But let's start at the beginning, I guess, of your role. How did you find yourself initially in the role of a caregiver?
Well, at the time when my husband started showing symptoms in December of 2019. So it was just right before our daughter was about to turn 1. I was still practicing as a certified nursing assistant at a long-term care facility at the time. And my husband, we woke up at one December morning at like 4:30 in the morning. I stepped out. He was changing our daughter's diaper. I stepped out for a minute to grab something. They came back to check on him. And my husband had this really weird look on his face. I said, "Are you okay?" He got 3 words out, "I don't know," and just passed out. Now, with my medical training, I was thinking, I never thought it would be like seizure related or neurological related. I thought, okay, there's a 20-year age gap, so he's in his early 50s. So I'm thinking he's just sleep deprived, being in his early 50s, caring for a 1 year old. And we were both working 40 plus hours a week to just make ends meet, right? And we were sleep deprived with the newborn. So, under a 1 year old. So I thought it was something like that. But when it happened, but so we started going to the doctor. And when it happened again in January of 2020 and March of 2020, we knew something was up. And that's when his primary was like, you know what? This is not my expertise, obviously, being a primary physician, but I'm sending you to referring you to a neurologist because I think there's something going on. And sure enough, they said it looks like it's seizure activity. And by April, he was really declining. That was the first month from April of 2020 to October, I would say, of 2020. He was still averaging 10 to 20 plus seizures a month. It was so bad. He blew through 2 medications. By May, we were definitely being referred to a actual specialist neurologist because the general neurologist could, there was nothing else that he could give him. And I was also starting to realize, you know what, this is big. This is getting out of control. We have a 1 year old. There's a pandemic going on. I am not wild about having people in my house right now, and I can't, and so if I'm going to leave my career, then I need to come up with something else. So that's when I started looking for remote work jobs. But the problem I was running into is I don't have anything except my medical training. No BA, no bachelor's, no
Right.
certification or X amount of years of experience in any other field.
Uh-huh.
And even something for as simple as telemarketing, they still wanted some, years of experience under your belt. And also the hours were just not work with having a 1 year old daughter who needs my attention. And then with my husband's illness being so random because you never know when a seizure is going to hit, I have to just be able to drop everything and just run and triage. Like right now on this call,
Yeah.
if my husband has a
Yeah.
seizure, I'm going to run and go take care of him.
Well,
So,
yeah.
and when you have a seizure, there's a lot of recovery. And so that means I got to take over taking care of my daughter. And so by July, we finally got him diagnosed we had medical proof that he did have epilepsy. And and seizures are serious. Our doctor or his neurologist explained, listen, this is going to be lifelong. Normally, it's caught early onset either as a child or if you have family history with a loved one who's had it before. But he was in that 20th percentile of the population where, for no apparent reason and regardless of age or prior medical history, he developed it later in life. And so by July, the little blog I'd been touring around with I was going hardcore and turning into my business. It's obviously different now with it being a coaching practice. But that's what started the journey. And I quit my job and I was home full time.
I resonated with that last thing that you said there when you said he was in that low percent where you don't
20th
know.
percentile, 1 in
Yeah.
26, 1 to 20, 1 in 26 or 1 to 20% is kind of the breakdown about how many people within their lifetime will develop
Yes.
a seizure disorder without any epilepsy or seizure disorder with no apparent prior medical history as a child or in their family tree. It does happen.
Right. Well, I mean, I was gonna say, with the two children, one, her illness was called biliary atresia, and she just didn't have a little bile duct, when she was born without it, and they don't know why, and it's not genetic, that type of thing. It's one, and I don't remember. And then my son has hypoplastic left heart syndrome, and you may know what that is, but essentially, half of his heart, it was under or not developed. Um, but again, no rhyme or reason as to why it happened, and it's very, 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 very rare. So it's like I've had several very, 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 very rare things happen, to one, to the same in the same family, is they weren't the same thing, but it's just, it's crazy some of the things. And like you've gone through a lot, it looks like. Um, and I was thinking too, when we first started talking, you were really in the caregiver role before he was sick when you were working as an aide,
Yeah,
right?
I was.
Right? Yeah. I
But it's
mean,
way
even though,
different. But it's way different when it's your family.
yeah, yeah,
There's some, I mean, obviously I loved what I did as today. I did it, I really loved being in the long-term care part of the population because it's a generation that's forgotten. A lot of these my patients were the last of their family, or their family didn't live close because they were out of state, or they just didn't have a healthy relationship with their family anymore. So they were isolated, alone. And I thought it was a real privilege and really important to be with them in their twilight years. Now, there was many CNA students I trained as a senior aide where I would get to train clinical students because, my employers trusted me. They liked how I worked and trained. And so I had the privilege of training many students over my career. And some of them, they figured out during clinicals this job wasn't for them because it made them think of their grandma or grandpa or a close relative or their mom. And that's fine. You have to have a strong stomach to do this to some degree. But I loved it. I loved what I did. But I have to say, I'm thankful that I had that training because that's what saved my hide. But long before my parents went downhill, before I was not, my dad was the primary caregiver for my mother, but I was my dad's primary caregiver the last 2 years of his life after we lost my mama. Um, I also helped care for my grandmother the last 2 years of her life. And that was a huge moment because my family just were clueless. They're like, what do we do? So I was the one that was teaching them how to stand pivot with a gait belt and kind of basic medical skills that they didn't know. Like, what do we do if she's on the floor? Do we try picking her up or do we call 911? So there's all these layers and nuances of caregiving that a majority of the population does not know how to do. But man, having that medical training has been a huge asset in my back pocket that I have just used for years now in caring for multiple family members from my professional career.
yeah. I can just see God in that, like just weaving all through there because I was thinking, like I said, your caregiving role kind of began there, even though it was a job and it is different when it's your loved one. But like you say, you have to have a certain strength, a certain well, maybe to have those characteristics to be able to do that, maybe had that calling, and then not only
Hmm.
did you have the calling to minister and serve to that population, but then also God used what you learned there to help you out with your situation, so it's just like that's how God
Hmm.
works.
Yeah, no, I do. And I also think it goes back to my background. My mother was a licensed family counselor for throughout her career until she got chronically ill. She had been chronically ill since she was younger than I am, since she was 20, and she died at 70, 71. No, 70. Yeah. And she, had multiple chronic illnesses, 3 bouts of cancer, fibromyalgia, respiratory problems, the whole shebang, kidney failure because of the cancer and radiation treatments. So she had a lot stacked against her, but she loved serving people and helping people in traumatic situations, and just understanding how people think and process, especially hard situations. And then daddy, he was a friends pastor for 33 years, and so we traveled all over the country and serving at different churches, friends churches, throughout his career. And he did that for 33 years, and then the last 10 to 13 he did work as a hospice chaplain. And he loved that because unlike a congregation, he got to work more solely one-on-one with families, and got to work with them inside their home when they're in that end of life stage. So he really loved that work because it was a little less intense than, in some ways, than when he would have to foster and nurture a whole congregation. So with my parents both being in that servitude role and working with lots of people, all kinds of different people from all walks of life, that just really resonated, I think, with me. Obviously, I didn't have the passion for psychology or anything like that, so I didn't go mama's route. And I do love to minister, but I didn't feel called to go into the church, like into a leadership role of the church. But I did feel like, there's certain gifts and talents, and I've always been fascinated with how the body works. As a little girl, I was watching rescue episodes of Rescue 911, ER, Chicago Hope. I was just fascinated with how the body works. And um, I'm thankful that with the healthcare industry, there is a lower tier of medical positions that don't require a bachelor's or master's. You can work in the healthcare industry as a CNA. It's the lowest bracket of nursing, but you still learn a lot. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Melissa, when you are in the role of a caregiver specifically for
Mhm.
a loved one, there are a lot of emotions that turn up when taking on the role. I know that from my own experience, as I mentioned, that these emotions aren't linear, but an in and out kind of cluster of love and fear and resentment and anger and sadness and even joy. So will you share with us some of the emotions you've encountered
Oh
along
yeah.
the
Oh
way?
yeah. Yeah. And I just want to have a disclaimer. It's okay to be angry with God. We're human beings. We were born with emotions. So the fear, the resentment, the anger, the frustration, they are created in us, okay? The only way that it gets to be unhealthy is when we don't channel them in in an unhealthy way, where
Right.
it's and there's repercussions on our family or friends or our clients if we're entrepreneurs
Yes.
like you, like Tonya and I. In the beginning, 2020 was definitely rough. By 2021, I was tapped out and burned out because I had skipped wellness visits. Um, it, I now know I was dealing with my IBS symptoms. I wasn't diagnosed until December of 2021. I started having symptoms in 2020, but I was just so tunnel visioned on my daughter and my husband. My health went to the back burner. I had my thyroid was out of whack. I've had hypothyroidism since I was 22 and I was having a flare up with that, but I just was putting it off. So, and then I was just spiritually angry. It's like I already have parents that were not in the greatest of health and we were isolated because of a pandemic. And then we'd gone through 6 years of just horrible, struggle to start a family because it's all we ever wanted. I wanted to have I've always wanted to be a mother and carry because being internationally adopted from Korea as a baby, I didn't get, my mother and father didn't get to have that experience. And so I always knew and had this dream that when I was pregnant, they'd get to have that experience. And so we just finally got to go through that and we had our beautiful miracle daughter. And then now I'm slammed in the gut again with an illness that is not fair because I mean my husband was relatively healthy except for being an ex-smoker. He was fine. And so I was pretty angry, but it took me a while to figure that out. I started working with a dear Christian life coach. I did a 3 month stint with her, two of them actually, and getting back into the place where I was able to just admit that I was angry, get back into journaling, which is something that I've done ever since I was a little girl, just to write things out, and just to acknowledge and just be around people where I felt validated and seen really went a long way, especially when it was around other strong women who were striving to be mighty women of God. That was huge for me. But it was hard. It was hard because being a former pastor's daughter, obviously I'm raised in the faith. I've been raised in the church and but it's amazing how trauma and struggle will put you to the test, which is definitely obviously we know is the work of Satan himself. He does not want us to stand in our truth in the Lord, but it happens, and it's not an overnight process, and it's not an overnight process. So if you are in that season of questioning the Lord, feeling angry, feeling frustrated, feeling resentment, first off, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not crazy. It's normal. Okay. The second part is I would definitely recommend finding a mentor, whether it's a member of your congregation, a senior pastor, maybe having a one-on-one talk with your senior pastor, one of your senior pastors, a Christian life coach like what I did, or some sort of mentor. Or even I know for me, what has really helped, even though it hasn't been spiritually, but I've been with the mastermind I've been being trained in now for 4 years. And the women in that community, even though they're not all of the faith, they still are mothers. They still have been touched by caregiving experiences as well. So just having another safe place where I know I won't be judged and I can share what's going on, besides scaling my business, which I want, having that place to be seen as a human being though is important too, because we're not just a number. So
Right.
never ever put yourself in feeling like I'm just another number or that you have to go to the back burner as a caregiver, especially from the spiritual side. Like what I teach with my clients is mind, body, soul. They're all three intertwined. So if you don't keep your tripod full and connected, it's going to be a house of cards. You're not, so spiritual. So physically, I was skipping wellness visits. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't sticking to my diet. I wasn't, adjusting my meds that I need to. I was skipping sleep. I was either staying up late. Well, I wasn't staying up late, but I was getting up really early to work on my business before my family woke up so I could get a few hours of quiet. And then I wasn't prioritizing my time with the Lord. And so those three just, it just became this, perfect storm whereby 2021, I was tapped out physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. My health, my physical health was out of control. And I was just in a really hard place. And so it took a year. Because I worked with my coaches up until 2022. And holy moly, cannoli, what a change of just starting to do all the doctor visits,
Uh-huh.
getting back to journaling, getting back to spending time with the Lord. Also, just finally realizing it's okay for me to spend time with the Lord in my own unique way. I prefer to kind of listen to things and then journal on them. So like Encounter is an app I've really grown to love, where it's meditations. I don't necessarily meditate, but I listen and then I journal and I read the passages. And the passages aren't long; they're like maybe 3 to 4 verses. That's a lot more easier for me to digest than trying to push myself. Oh, I got to read a whole chapter of something. You can do it
Yeah.
in your own way. Just investing in yourself, whether it's wellness visits, medication, passions, knitting, reading books, I don't care. Just do something to nurture your mind, to nurture yourself, because it will manifest in all three. Your sleep will get better. You'll have more energy. You won't be irritable. You won't be feeling like you're blowing your stack. You'll feel more connected with the Lord, and you'll feel like you're able to stop and pause and listen to what He's saying to you throughout your day. And you'll just have that peace that passes all understanding. You'll have your good days and bad days still,
Right.
but your cope level will be, I promise you and I assure you, will be so much better. It'll be so much better.
Yes. Yes. And that is a big thing. The life coach,
Mhm.
what kind of things did you do with the life coach? Are they the ones that suggested journaling to you, or were you already doing that?
Well, a lot of the coaches I've worked with, they really come back to journaling. There's something interesting about writing stuff down versus typing. There's something that happens with our brains where writing something out just brings up a lot more for us, and we realize there's a lot more to unpack. And plus, journaling is something that's very personal, and it's also a safe place. You can treat it like a friend. If you need to cuss, swear, I mean, I know obviously as Christians we don't want to, but if you got to get that out somewhere, and a private journal, notebook is a lot safer, or even a therapist, counselor is a lot better, or a senior advisor is so much better than having it boil over, just bottling it up,
Right.
or maybe physical activities your thing. Maybe it is time to get back going on those, doing a mile run every day or a walk. What I tell my clients, 15-minute breaks, 15 minutes to refill your water, 15 minutes to get something to eat, 15 minutes to journal, 15 minutes
Mhm.
to read a chapter out of a book, or better yet, God's word, 15 minutes to listen to a meditation, 15 minutes to do something creative. And it's important because if there's anything I figured out after my grandmother passed and my father passed or my mother passed, is even though the caregiving roles in that season are over, I'm still Melissa. I'm still a human being,
Yeah.
and I need to have
Right.
other outlets to keep that going. And just do something that you can keep going and coming back to even after the caregiving journey is over, because it can also twofold with helping you through the grief part. Because grief is traumatic, and grief actually happens sometimes even before they pass away because that's coming.
Yeah.
But it's so important. It's so important.
You stated to me via email in an email that you have learned that even though we live in a fallen world where such grief, pain, and trauma can happen, we serve a God that still cares and provides, especially in ways we couldn't expect. Say more what you mean by it. What kind of ways did God surprise you um, during all of this? How did He show up for you?
Similarly, like I said earlier with my mastermind that I'm in, that has become another family to me. I have lifelong friends in there. Long after I leave that mastermind and I scale my business to 6 figures of where I want it to go, that has been huge. Um, and support and being a support system I never had, because that actually was the first one when we were shut down. I would say also our church has just been wonderful. They've
Uh,
been there through the whole ride with Daryl's illness. Um, I also would say the Lord has provided financially for us in ways with what my, just with how, like when, with how, with just being able to inherit a house, just being able to have something
Yeah.
to still to raise our daughter, and that's ours.
Yeah. What a
It's so
blessing.
special.
What a
Yeah, what
blessing.
it's been a blessing. I love being
Yeah.
able that she has her own room now and we're the owner. So that has been a huge provision for us. And then just with being able to send our daughter to the same private Christian school that I did. I never thought that would happen, but it has worked out where we can do that. So, but that's been so fun just to how the Lord has still opened up other opportunities to expand my network of support is what I like to call it. And I tell my clients, build your caregiver network of support, um, besides family and friends,
And
yeah,
yeah.
and it's just opportunities. I never in a million years I thought I'd be doing healthcare because I loved it up until I retired. I'm doing a whole new career where I get to use my medical experience personally and professionally to help others. I mean, come on, how cool. It can't get more cooler than that. I'm on this podcast talking to you, and I have a podcast of my own that's going to turn 3 in October, or actually did turn 2 or 3 this year. Anyway, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
but I have a podcast of my own. So it's like,
Yes.
what? So I'm
Yes.
doing things I never thought I would do that are not within the skill set of a CNA, because with your on the entrepreneurship side, you want to be able to give them the best support and understanding what their needs are.
Yeah. Yeah.
That,
So,
yeah, and,
so I
and
would
and that
keep
could get
a,
tricky and that can get tiring, because when you're the parent having to do that back then for you,
yeah.
it's really nice where they e-file everything to anything. So that's why having your loved ones, all doctors, so I say
Yeah.
primary specialists, all of your
Yeah.
doctors, surgeons, you want to keep them in the loop. So whenever they ask you, what other doctor do you want this
Right.
sent to? Make
Yeah.
sure you have a current phone number, address, and fax number, or after hours line too. Like if they're, like, say in the hospital, they're having a procedure but something goes wrong, they want to be able to call your
Right.
your other members of your team after hours if they need to be in the headspace, because like this is what happened with my dad. He had 3 different health issues going on, and it was hard. When we would address one, it would tip the scale for the other two, or one of the other two. And so it's you kind of have to skate sometimes when you're dealing with, if you have someone that's dealing with like more than one health issue, I would say. I'll put it that way. And
Hmm.
so just really getting good with communicating with your team is very important. So
Yes. Is this the type of things that you talk about on your podcast?
my podcast is Caregiving and Entrepreneurship Reimagined. I believe that it does not have to be a choice between caring for your loved one and your business. I talk about business stuff over there. It's more kind of an interview. I do a couple solo episodes from time to time, but mainly it's me interview. I bring in guests that talk about either self-care, caregiving, or entrepreneurship, or even motherhood, because I'm a mom too. And I know there's other entrepreneurs who are not only an entrepreneur, but they're also a caregiver and they're a parent. So, there's so much going on. So you can find that on Spotify, Apple, and my YouTube channel, and also on my blog. I repurpose episodes over onto my blog.
And what's your YouTube channel?
My YouTube channel is at Caregiver Entrepreneur Reimagined.
Awesome. Awesome. And so your business,
Yeah, I'm a caregiver and business coach. So I will take entrepreneurs who are are in the throes of balancing entrepreneurship and learning to be a caregiver. There's so much that is being thrown at them that I know is scary. I've again I've had the benefit at the headspace of knowing what to do, and so so I can give that expertise to entrepreneurs. So it's interesting. It's the worlds have collided, but it's so beautiful how the Lord has worked it out that they collide so well.
yes, the Lord does that for us. That's awesome. Well, and thank you for training us today and everything. Um, we got a lot of information from you today. You're very helpful on the topic. I definitely appreciate it, and I know our listeners will appreciate it as well. So until next time, this is Tonya and Melissa here at the Grit and Grace podcast. Bye bye. Thank you for watching the Grit and Grace podcast. Don't forget to follow me on social media on Facebook at the Grit and Grace podcast, TikTok, and Instagram. I've always provide all my updates on my social platforms, and I look forward to seeing you there. Again, be blessed in Jesus' name and pray for me as I continue to pray for you. Thanks again. for watching the Grit and Grace podcast. Bye-bye.